Hello and welcome back. Jeb Smith here. So as many of you know, we're in a very competitive housing market at the moment where offers are going above the asking price in many cases, selling with multiple offers. And I've had a lot of viewers reach out to me directly asking me, should I go directly to the listing agent, ditch my buyer's agent so that I can ensure myself success, have a better likelihood of getting my offer accepted? So that's what we're going to dive into today. We're going to talk about some of, the pros, but also the cons of working directly with the listing agent in order to get your offer accepted, especially in the environment that we're in right now. And for many of you watching this video, you might say, how can you work with the listing agent and as your buyer's agent? How does the state allow that? In some cases, like California, we do have the ability to do dual agency, which means the listing agent can also represent you as the buyer's agent on a transaction. If it seems like a gray area, it's because it is. The listing agent is hired on behalf of the seller, whereas the buyer's agent is hired typically on behalf of the buyer. And so, you could see where there could be a gray area if the listing agent who is hired on behalf of the seller is also representing the buyer. And that's why we're going to dive into this in a little bit more detail, help give you some things to think about if you're considering going directly to the listing agent to help them, write your offer. And I can understand, right? You're in a market, again, it's competitive. There's a lot of buyers out there that have put in multiple offers on properties and continually getting turned down and not really knowing what to do, where to turn, how to get their offer accepted. So they're thinking, well, I'm just going to ditch my buyer's agent and go directly to the listing agent to hopefully get my offer accepted. But I'd ask you, at what cost? At what cost are you willing to get your offer accepted? And that's really what it comes down to, because in a market right now where, listing agents do have multiple offers and things are going above the asking price, at what point what are you willing to give up in order to get your offer accepted? So that's why, I think it's important to have a buyer's agent, not only in this market, but every market, because it's a different set of eyes on the property. For one, it's someone that really has your best interest in mind, or should have your best interest in mind. And that is really the first thing, right? I mean, you hire a buyer's agent to represent you. The listing agent is typically hired by the seller to represent them, and their job is to get the most amount of money for the seller. Let's consider this example to start. A seller has told the listing agent a price that they're willing to accept on a property, and say maybe it's the list price, just for our conversation here, but the buyer, for example, wants to come in with a lower price on that property. The listing agent knows what the seller is willing or trying to accept on that property, but the buyer's agent wants to come in less. So the listing agent is likely going to try to push the buyer up in price to get it to that number that the seller is willing to accept, versus, working with the buyer to try to negotiate that price down and get the buyer the best price on that home. That's just one example. But consider this as well. As a buyer's agent, they're there to potentially point out red flags in the property. Many, many times when I'm walking through a property with a buyer, I'm pointing out things in the property to make the buyer aware of them. Could be cracks in the wall, could be, a roof that's bad, could be, a furnace that looks old, whatever it is in the property. I'm constantly looking for issues as an agent when I walk through a property. Because I'm detail oriented, I want to point it out to my clients, right? A lot of times they're emotional going through the process of buying a home and they're not really looking at the details of the property. I'm there to point them out. And a lot of times these issues are going to come up in a home inspection anyway, but I want to make them aware of those potential issues now. Maybe it's in a flight path and there's planes going above you and what have you. Or maybe it was during the pandemic and there were no planes flying at that time, but I know it's in a flight path. I'm pointing that sort of thing out. Whereas a listing agent on the other side, again, may not mean to miss these things, but maybe they're not as detail oriented. Maybe they're not there to potentially bring these issues up to the buyer, these red flags, if you will, because their mind is on selling the property, getting the seller the most amount of money, if you will, for that property, and they're not thinking about these small things. Sometimes they're incentivized because they get a dual commission, right? They get the commission for the listing agent. They also get the commission for the buyer's agent. And whether or not they mean to, maybe they forget to disclose things because they're thinking about the finish line. When you have a buyer's agent there, you not only have someone to ask those additional questions, another set of eyes, but you also have someone there to negotiate on your behalf, right? Someone that's trying to get you the best deal possible. And in some cases, you're going above the asking price. You're writing an offer above what they're asking, and you don't, as a buyer, maybe you don't feel like you're getting the best deal because of that situation. Well, that buyer's agent is still there to help you negotiate, whether it's repairs or what have you, and guide you through that process. It's just really someone there that's for your best interests, because oftentimes, again, the listing agent is as equal as they want to be in representing both the buyer and the seller. Because of how they were hired, it can be difficult to break away from that in many cases. I'll tell you, as someone who represents both buyers and sellers, in this market, I've elected not to do dual agency on the last 3-4 transactions I've done, even though I've had an opportunity to do so, because it was a gray area, because I knew we were going to receive multiple offers and go well above the asking price. I didn't want to be put in that position where I was basically telling a buyer where they needed to be on the price, because it's not right. And there are a lot of listing agents out there that do a great job of representing both buyers and sellers, but there are just as many that don't. And you have to make sure that, when you go out there and you're working with someone, they have your best interest in mind. And separating the buyer's agent from the listing agent can oftentimes ensure that you've got somebody working, on your behalf versus someone that's just trying to get a deal closed. Now, again, we're in a market that things are selling quickly. They're going above the asking price. And, that may be your opportunity to get that property is by going with that listing agent. But understand, there are things that you could be giving up by doing so. And understand, this is something that that affects me directly, right? I'm one of those agents out there that believes that we shouldn't have dual agency, believe it or not, even though I've benefited from it many times in my career. I believe it's a very difficult road to navigate, even for professionals out there. And so I'm, can see both sides of it, but I would tell you, in a market right now, you need someone, even though it's competitive, even though things are selling quickly, you need someone out there that can represent you, to the best capacity possible, to the fullest extent possible, if you will, and make sure that your best interests are represented, because, you don't want to not only overpay for a property, but you don't want to buy a property that has issues and certain things that should have been pointed out to you and were missed or not disclosed or whatever for any reason. And not to say that happens on every transaction, but it does happen. And it even happens in cases where you have a buyer's agent, but less likely to happen if you have two parties working together versus one party directing both sides. So that's my 2 cents on ditching a buyer's agent and going directly to a listing agent in this market. And again, I have skin in the game, right, as somebody that represents both sides, but I just want to make it clear what you should be considering if you're out there buying a home in this market, and why having an agent on your side is important. And this could go for even, in for sale by owners as well. You need an agent to represent you. New construction, you need an agent to represent you separate from those who are selling the property, just to make sure you have proper representation. So that's my 2 cents there. If you have questions, comments, do me a favor, leave them below. As always, I appreciate you taking the time to watch. Appreciate the support. See you again soon. Have a great day. Bye-bye.